Is that right? I mean, there was no Labor candidate in the field, as I understand it. How can we be sure that it is that ringing an endorsement?
Of course, and the reason we know there was no Labor candidate in the field, they did polling to decide whether it was worth their time, and they didn't like what they heard from that polling. And what they heard from that polling was that they were on the nose, and they were on the nose for a variety of reasons. And some of those reasons were the massive taxes that people are facing in this state, including many people within the seat of Warrandyte. The school payroll tax, there's many people in Warrandyte who send their students to school at great expense, and they were going to see those fees go up. There's many people who saw the land tax increases that affected them directly, and just economic competence and integrity. Integrity was a big issue in this election, and they didn't like what they saw from the Andrews government. So the Andrews government could have put a candidate up. They did in Aston, and they chose not to here because they didn't like what they were about to be told.
Okay, so what will the new member, Nicole Werner, add from her skills and her background to the state parliamentary team?
Every member brings their own personal perspective, and Nicole has an experience that I think is sadly more relevant than ever. Nicole managed a food bank, and in my electorate of Menzies, there's 6 food banks, and with the cost of living crisis that we're seeing throughout this nation, those queues are out the door. And Nicole has seen firsthand what it takes for people who are in dire straits to keep their family together, to pay bills, to hold their job and to put food on the table. So I think Nicole has come at just the right time where everyone in Victoria is really hurting right now. And I think that sort of experience and character and integrity will serve her and the seat well.
Good. Are there any lessons that the Federal Liberal Party can take from this poll result?
Look, there's always lessons, and you can always quarantine these things and say it was a separate issue, separate level of government. But I think the common lesson is that when we focus on the issues that matter to everyday Australians, and we do it well, and we do it with integrity and sincerity, then we will be rewarded for it. That's what happened on the weekend, and I think that's what we will look to do in the coming election.
Leader John Pesutto has been facing some difficult and rocky times. Does this change the composition of the state party room in a way that would shift the party's position on any key issues, including the leadership?
I don't think so. I think this, I know Ryan Smith, the outgoing member, very well, and I'm not a member of that party room, so I never know who voted what. We see press results for it. I don't think so. And Nicole's not focused on those sort of Spring Street issues. She's focused on bread and butter issues that matter to the people of Warrandyte. And of course, the press and other commentators, and it's your job as well, Amanda, will look at that. But I think what this is, it's a resounding result for John Pesutto and his team, because they're focused on the things that matter to Victorians. And I think that's what they're going to be doing in the next 6 to 12 months and beyond.
Okay. Keith, in the next few days, we'll know when the Voice referendum is to be held. The announcement of the date, of course, has been a long time coming. Is Prime Minister Albanese's delay in doing so a sign that the yes side of the argument are losing confidence?
I think what we've seen throughout this whole debate is that tactics are driving a lot of the decisions. And that's a great shame, because this is a very serious question that we're putting to the Australian people, potentially in 7 weeks from now. And so it seems like it's going to be the 14th of October. We'll wait and see what the Prime Minister says. But I think we need to stop focusing on tactics on either side, and let's focus on the substance of the question that's put before people. And there are serious concerns about that question that should be debated freely without any sort of name-calling or criticising people. Because right now this is a very finely balanced referendum, and whatever the results on the 14th of October, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a unifying moment. It seems like we will be a more divided nation, and that's a very sad thing.
What reaction have you had in your electorate to the AEC's decision to accept a tick as a yes vote, but to refuse to count crosses as no votes?
I think many people were quite surprised that that was the existing arrangements, and I understand the arguments that that has been in place since 1999, but we don't have referendum often, so we get to look at these things fresh. And I think people feel like there's an inconsistency, and when there's an inconsistency, it feels unfair. There is a chance potentially to fix it, and I think, of course, we should. And again, I understand how the arguments that have been put that in certain circumstances a cross could be viewed as a yes on different forms, but let's focus on this question and this form, and let's make sure that all Australians' votes are counted properly and that their intent is clearly reflected in the result.
Finally, in the Sir Harry Gibbs oration yesterday at the Samuel Griffith Society conference, Eminent Silk Alan Myers of King's Council, and I'm paraphrasing him here so that you're not thinking I'm quoting him word for word, cautioned Australians against accepting assurances from politicians of the modesty of the voice proposal, given that the High Court has, as recently as the pandemic, been willing to interpret clear words in the Constitution like, for instance, the words intercourse between the states shall be absolutely free, to mean the very opposite of what those words say, such as that it is subject to substantial restrictions and not capable of being free where certain tests are met. Do you agree that that warning should be heeded?
Absolutely, and I know Alan Myers well. He's one of the most brilliant legal minds in this country. I had the privilege of being one of his junior counsel in a very long-running matter and saw him at work in court. That's the whole point of this. I was, as you know, the deputy chair of the Referendum Joint Select Committee earlier in the year, and this absolutely isn't a modest proposal. Many of us were expecting the Prime Minister and his cabinet to wind it back. And I think that they're probably regretting that they didn't do that because particularly in part 2 of that proposal, there is serious power. And when many others, including my good friend Julie and Lisa, said, why don't you remove part 2? They fought to the death to save it. And you only do that when it actually has real consequence. And that consequence will be decided by a future High Court, as Alan Myers noted.
Yeah, good point. Thank you very much for your time and for your insight, Keith Wolahan.